looking at also the displacement that children face in light of natural disasters and climate extreme weather events with climate change. I'll introduce our next speaker here, Dr. Warren Bell. He's been a family physician for more than 40 years in Salmon Arm, and he's a past founding president of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, 25 years ago, in fact. He is engaged in advocacy work from the municipal to the international level. His integrated practice includes insight-oriented psychotherapy. And as part of this panel discussion, he will present his perspective and evidence of the psychological effect of climate change on children, including the impact of family displacement from wildfires, floods, and extreme weather events. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Dr. Warren Bell.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I may well be the primary rural physician in this gang. And I can assure you that I see the effects of displacement on children and families all the time. Every time there's a bad wildfire year, sometimes it's flooding, but wildfires are the ones that are most terrifying for children. And I see disruption in their lives. I see fragmentation in their financial status, all sorts of things come up. I'm going to talk now, and I'm going to put some slides up. Unless somebody has to enable me to do that. So I'll let that happen. I'm going to show some slides that I think apply to every child in every family. Because right now, we have an illusion about children that they don't know what's going on in the world until they're old enough for us to tell them what's going on in the world, but that's not actually how it happens. They are fully aware of what's going on. So here we are. I hope you can see a slide. Tell me if you can, because that would be really nice, and I would know that we're on the road here.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
So I just get this. Here we are. Now the theme of my talk is, and this is what I say every parent with every child really needs to do if you want your child to be able to deal with some of the stresses induced by climate change, and that is to talk to them and act on it with them. I underlined act and I underlined with. I'm going to do a little compare and contrast. About half a century ago, the world was faced with conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, and it led to such things as MAD, mutual assured destruction, and other anomalous and peculiar plans that made no sense because nobody wanted to kill themselves as well as everybody else. And children were exposed to all this kind of information about the potential dire threats to their survival. And as it turns out, they had a lot of reactions and they were very, very distressed. They were told to do things like this: if there's a nuclear explosion, hide under the desk, which is pathetically ineffective. And I'm sure many children realize that. But there was different times from today. One of the films, you may have heard this title, Duck and Cover. They were told to, lie on the ground, put your hands over your head and pretend that you're okay. And this is the film that was the propaganda film that was sent around to all families in the United States, and it crossed the border into Canada as well. And basically the theme was, if you duck and cover, you'll be safe. And there's a monkey with a firecracker. Bert the turtle is there, but because Bert's such a smart turtle, what he does when the monkey lights the firecracker is he disappears in his shell and the monkey is blown up. And that was what you had to do to save yourself from a nuclear holocaust. Needless to say, children didn't really believe that. And as it turns out, even though everybody was talking about this duck and cover thing you see these young kids here doing, it didn't work very well. And kids were terribly anxious and upset. And the only time they weren't anxious and upset was when their parents were doing something about trying to mitigate the threat of nuclear disaster. This is, in essence, what happened. There were lots of kids who were worried. There were some kids whose lives were so messed up they couldn't think about anything. But the ones who were thinking about it were worried, but they were more personally secure because they saw something happening. They saw their parents acting as if they were protagonists in this struggle, not just passive or observers or victims. So let's turn to today's climate crisis because it's just as bad, and it's different in some important ways and in some ways worse. So kids see this in the news all the time, as we do as adults, and they see images like this as well. Doesn't matter which continent you live on, it doesn't matter how old your kids are, they are exposed to imagery like this on a constant basis. And as a result, they experience this phenomenon, which has been named eco-anxiety. Will we have a planet to live on? And there's some important differences, I said, between what happened back in the 70s and what's happening now. Here's a survey that was done by the BBC of children, and they did quite a few, a couple of thousand kids between 8 and 16, and this is what they found. First of all, 80% of kids said this is a really important thing. Climate change is really significant. But 75% of them said that it's right here and right now. It's not something in the future. It's not like a nuclear war that you have to drop a bomb for. It's happening now. 20% of kids had, in that previous week, had a nightmare about something bad happening as a result of climate change. 60%, 3 out of 5, didn't think that adults, that's us, were doing enough to address this issue. So here they are feeling not only threatened, but also feeling that the adults around them are either impotent or disengaged in some fashion. Now, what's different today is that there's a sort of maturation that's gone on in society, so that now it's not just kids you have to look after, it's all of us participating in this exercise. So this is, I just put this up to emphasize that David Attenborough, who's made some very strong public statements about climate change, who's 94 years old, and Greta Thunberg, who when she started was 15 and now she's 17, the full age spectrum of human society is now engaged in this problem. Whereas before it was the adults solving the problem, you know, the soldiers and the generals and the presidents and the prime ministers. Now it's everybody. So I want to point out some differences from then till now. First of all, the only communications back in the 80s were movies, newspapers, etc., the standard ones. Nowadays, we have a deluge of information coming at us from all sides. So a parent who thinks they can protect their child from information about climate change is in the wrong century. Back then, and if you go to that movie Duck and Cover, it's on the US government website, it's pathetic. Children are just doing exactly what their parents say at all times and smiling, yes, mom, of course, whatever you say. School teachers say, go over there, they go over there. It's not the way it is today. Today, children at best are guided because we know that children are full of ideas and creativity, so we don't try and order them around as much as we used to. Back then, technology was mechanical. Today, technology is digital, or there's a digital element in just about everything. So there's an incredible richness in the technology around us that wasn't there before. Back then, the nuclear crisis was localized. There was only one finger on the red button. Well, it had to be two. There are two buttons in the sort of crisis center that had to be pressed, and nobody else was able to start a nuclear war because we didn't have nuclear weapons in our basement. Today, the climate crisis is engaging every single human being on the planet. There is no innocent bystander watching it all and saying, I've got nothing to do with me. The timeline back then was not clear because as long as nobody pressed the button, nothing would happen. Here, we know what the timeline is, and we know it's short, and we know it's significant. Finally, back then, all the experts were old, hoary people like me. Now, young role models are standing up and saying things, and they're saying things very eloquently. So a completely different situation, engaging, involving, and also inescapable. So here's a few things that you can consider when you're talking to your kids. Now, you'll notice as I go through this, that this could apply to adults as well as to children. This is not something where you tell your kids, you have to tell yourself exactly what you're telling them. So, yes, you talk to an adult, but maybe you, as an adult, talk to another adult about your worries and how much they're affecting you and disrupting your life. Being involved in positive change that's something that kids really appreciate if they have an opportunity to join in a march, to even if they're in their baby carriage. You know, I've seen some marches with prams everywhere and kids roaming around and smiling and carrying little placards. It can create almost a festive atmosphere in addressing this dire issue. Join a campaign or group. Now that applies to adults, it applies to children, it applies to all of us. And this is I'm emphasizing this again and again, this is an issue that faces all of us equally. And there's no big expert who's going to solve the problem by snapping their fingers. Get your school or your family to do things in your own life. So, as the director of environmental activity for the Interior Health Authority told me once, he said, my 4-year-old told me not to throw out my package for my razor. And I was embarrassed. I'm ahead of the thing for the whole Interior Health Authority, and my 4-year-old was telling me off. And finally, none of us have got the handle on this completely. We're all struggling to address this issue together. And that means that if your child doesn't have to be Greta Thunberg, and you don't have to be, a world expert in climatology. You don't have to be a member of the IPCC. We're all facing this together. So a certain amount of humility and acceptance that if your children ask you questions you can't answer, it's not because you failed. It means you better read some more and look around a bit. So the final point is this, that it's collaboration between parents and children. It's not instructing or solacing your children, it's collaborating with them. And I just want to take this off for our kids. You see some of these suggestions are exactly what I'm talking. Join For Our Kids, yes, which is a group. Start your own group. Do something in yellow. And I've said this for many years. If we related to our children differently from what our forebears have done, not all of it, but just in terms of how we get off our pedestal as parents and say, we're in this, we don't have all the answers, we could change the world overnight. And so that's it.
That's wonderful.
That's the conversation took place in our backyard a couple of years ago. There we are. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I think that's really important to really emphasize the power of each individual person, the power of collaboration, and that we don't all need to be experts to recognize that there is a problem, and we all need to be speaking out and looking for some small ways that we can collaborate to make a difference. The science is clear. We just need the